Good afternoon, everyone. I've been away for a while, so I lost track as to whether we had done the karakia last or the prayer. So I'll be starting with the prayer. I apologise if there's people been tracking, and I got it around the wrong way, but we'll start with the prayer and end with the karakia. Honour and glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to all people. Lord, develop a new heart inside all of us. Instill in us your sacred spirit. Help us, guide us in all the things we need to learn today. Amen. Please be seated. Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to this month's Ordinary Council meeting. It is nice to be back here after some time off, and thank you to the Deputy Mayor for stepping in while I was away. Do we have any apologies? There appear to be none. Conflicts of interest. Councillor Hovell.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two items in the agenda, one in the public part and one in the public excluded, that relate to the district plan. I have a non-financial conflict arising with regard to both, and I will not be taking part in any discussion or resolution of those items, but I will be available for councillors in my role as chair of the District Plan Committee to answer any questions they might have on process.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I follow suit and I won't be taking part in those two conversations either, and that's not financial reasons, it's, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser.
Yes, I too have a conflict in item 1 in the in-committee part of the meeting. It's non-financial as well, and I will not be taking part in any conversation during that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further conflicts? Thank you for bringing those forward. We will go into the confirmation of minutes. So first up, we have the confirmation of minutes on the 10th of October. Do we have any questions or comments? Seems not. Could I please have a move that these are true and correct? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor McPhail. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting on the 31st of October. Any questions or comments in here? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one point of clarification. I asked the General Manager on page 15 about the unbudgeted items on for democracy costs, and there is a whole list there, but one that was missing that she said was an increase in travel and accommodation for the Mayor, and that's actually not included in the minutes. I wonder if that could be added, please, for clarity.
Got that, Susan? Happy? Any further questions or comments? Could I please have a move that those are true and correct, and for the addition that Councillor Reid move? Happy to move? And seconded by Councillor Paul McPhail. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Motion is carried. Confirmation of the emergency meeting held on Wednesday the 8th of November. Any questions or comments on these minutes? Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yes, just through your worship and with due respect, page 22, there was 2 lots of points of order called. I think they're subject to the standing orders. Just wish to clarify and confirm, can the chair act on a point of order in regard to section 26, just for clarification really and future reference?
My understanding of standing orders is that usually if it's about the performance of the chair, you would pass it on to, in this case, the Deputy Mayor. However, the reason I didn't in that case is because it wasn't a point of order in my opinion. So if you go to standing orders, it has to be very clear as to what the point of order was. It was
the point of order was made under whether it was relevant, under 26(2)(c), I think it was, the relevance. And I'm just clarifying whether you can, whether it's appropriate for you to have made that point of order on both myself and Councillor Hovell. Just for future reference, if
No,
we're happy
that's
with
fine.
that.
Yeah. Code of conduct, sorry, standing orders.
If, with due respect, Your Worship, just 26(2)(c) is just that it was irrelevant to inform the Chair that the topic being discussed is not the matter currently before the meeting, which was the relevance to it. And you basically said, I don't believe that's correct, and then moved on.
Yes, Councillor, I get the point you're making. Yeah, I know the one, but there is a, so 26.3, if you read on, expressing a difference of opinion or contradicting a statement by the previous speaker does not constitute a point of order. So that's what I was basing my decision on, is that if you read through the minutes, you didn't specifically say that it was to do with relevance. So that's why I made that decision. But point taken.
Yep.
In the future, I can just defer it straight away if that makes councillors more comfortable.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further questions on those minutes? No, could I please have a move that those are true and correct? Councillor Richard McPhail, seconded by Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Did we have any questions or comments? Appear to be none. Could I have a move that these are true and correct, and to move any of the recommendations in there? Councillor Stringer, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. And lucky last, the confirmation of the minutes of the Policy and Regulatory Committee held on the 14th of November. Councillor Hovell.
At the bottom of page 29, the last paragraph starting, some may argue the owners of properties that had architectural vintage, the word should be value.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Could I please have a move that they are true and correct? Any of the recommendations in there and the amendment by Councillor Hovell. Happy to move. Seconded by Councillor Stringer. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Seem to have had quite a few meetings, which is progress. Moving on to urgent late business. I will jump the gun here. I have a piece of urgent late business relating to the LGNZ Young Elected Members Hui attendance. This was a report asked for by the Deputy Mayor. The reason it is urgent is because it was asked for after the publication of this agenda, and the Hui will take place before the next meeting. I'm happy to move that as urgent late business. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Hovell. Do we have any questions about the urgent late business? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. I will just give a second to hand out the report. We will deal with it as the last item of business, which will give councillors plenty of time to read through it in the meantime. So it'll become the new item 16 before we go on. Did we have any other urgent late business? Does not seem like it. We had a mover and a seconder. Did I do all those in favour? Nope. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Motion is carried. That is now item 16. Moving on to item 5. Just get my timer up. We have the petition for the appointment of the interim chief executive. I'd like to welcome Hayden McIntyre up to the stand.
Before you do, Your Worship, I move that the presenter is not permitted to speak to the petition, as this is an employment matter. This motion is authorised by Standing Order 17.2, as set out on the agenda.
Your Worship, I'd like to second that.
Happy for a mover and a seconder. Can we just take a moment to make sure what the procedure is here? Because it is in our standing orders that is the right to be able to speak to a petition. So are you looking to, was the standing order that you referenced an exception to that rule?
17.2 says the petitioner may speak unless the meeting resolve otherwise.
Ah, okay.
So,
Yep.
may speak unless it is otherwise.
In that case, if there is our standing orders, you're welcome to move and second that. The floor is open for debate.
Given it appears no one wishes to speak, I would suggest that the motion be put.
Okay. This has caught me off guard, as my understanding was all petitioners were allowed to speak, but it does stay in our standing orders that you are allowed to resolve otherwise. So unless there is any further comment, Councillor McKenzie.
I just ask one question: why, in this particular case, when other people can speak to petitions? There needs to be a reason, and that reason is, thank you.
Thank you,
But
Councillor
this
McKenzie. Councillor Dixon.
This is an employment matter between the council and the CEO.
I totally get that. Whether the petition has any effect or not, I understand that it is an employment issue, but we probably all know what the result will be. But I do believe that people have the right to speak. And I totally agree that it is an employment issue. Yes, I concur with that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further discussion on this topic? I agree with Councillor McKenzie that while I may or may not agree with the petition, I still do feel like it should be the right of petitioners to speak. We have some pretty strict guidelines and standing orders of what people are allowed and not allowed to say, but as I said before, there is a provision in standing orders, as Councillor Dixon rightly pointed out. So yeah, that is what it is. That's our standing orders. If there's no further discussion, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Aye. Nay. The motion is carried. Hayden, you can sit back down. So we will move on to debating the. We'll move on to debating the issue. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that the Mayor and the councillors do not receive this petition, the appointment of the Chief Interim Executive.
I second the motion.
Thank you, councillors. The motion on the table is to not receive the report. Is open for debate.
Your Worship, that's petition. Thanks.
Sorry, what was that? The petition shall not be received. Yes, yeah, got that. It's open for debate. Do we have any questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Hovell.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just have a slight malfunction in the software that's here. Given that I'm going to be quoting from documents, I think it's important that the matter come up before me. Just one moment, please.
Does Councillor Phillips want to go?
Thank you.
You
No,
got it?
I'll start. This petition, in my view, is divisive and an unnecessary and unwelcome distraction from the purpose for which I stood for the council. The petition has been instigated by the McIntyre family members and is not the only correspondence that I have received from them throughout this year. Sally McIntyre bombards me and other councillors on a regular basis with inappropriate emails, and I'd like to read to you the email that I received last week. Dear councillors Hovell, Dixon and McPhail, one wonders when you will wake up to the pathetic actions, your pathetic actions. Why do you keep on digging yourselves in a hole? For the sake of our district, your resignations will be much appreciated, as it's very clear you're not up to the job. Fed up ratepayer, Sally McIntyre. If I continue to receive such emails from Sally McIntyre, I will be asking the IT manager at the council to put a ban on her emails coming into this council. There is, of course, a precedence for such action, as Sally McIntyre will recall in 2010, when the council would not accept emails from her. That was the culmination of a series of events dating back to 2007, when she resigned from the council. Tracy Hicks, Mayor at the time, has reportedly told Mrs McIntyre the health and well-being of council staff must be accorded higher priority than engaging in your personal crusade. It seems little has changed over the last 13 years, except it's now the health and well-being of some councillors and staff that's at risk. I'd rather be devoting my time as chair to WasteNet, working on a community scheme for full recycling across the whole region, and for Gore. I'd rather have my role as chair of the council's Policy and Regulatory Committee, focusing on attracting development and future growth in this area, so that the young people that we have, our children, don't have to leave home to find jobs or to find further education. I'd much rather be discussing with my fellow councillors the introduction of a new rating scheme that is fair and reasonable and puts us in place for moving forward. Time taken up by these petitions and these emails is stopping me from undertaking what I believe are the important tasks in this community. My motivation in making decisions around this table is determined by what I believe is best for the community, and at times that requires me to put aside my personal views. A case in point, the pipeline to get the water across the Mataura River. My personal view was strongly we should have a bridge. My community view, taking everything into account, was put it under the river. At times too, decisions that I make around this table involve a cost to the council. A case in point, the ceasing of payment for getting books out of the library. That idea came from me, it was promoted by me, and I moved the motion for it. And it was passed with near unanimous support. It had a cost, but it was the right thing to do. I do wonder the motivations of the petition organisers. I want to highlight why I supported the appointment of the interim chief executive. Reason one, it provides stability, having continuity in leadership to the staff and continuity in the advice received by councillors. Reason two, it enables a seamless transition to the appointment of a new chief executive. Reason three, it provides confidence to the community that the business of council continues uninterrupted. Reason four, the major review we're currently undertaking of the long-term plan enables us to consider a new rating system that's fair and appropriate, using the considerable knowledge and expertise of the man who has overseen it for the last 20 years. Reason 5, the Council has a legal and moral responsibility to ensure it continues to operate effectively and efficiently. If any elected member believes I'm wrong with regard to any of these, please speak up. To my fellow councillors, I invite you to think why you stood for council. If, like me, you stood seeking to enhance the social, economic, cultural and physical well-being of the people and community in this great area we call Gore, then you must support the motion. To Sally McIntyre, I say I will not be resigning from council. I will continue working towards outcomes that I believe are in the best interest of the district. A case in point, the appointment of the interim chief executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
I'd just like to ask if there's any other councillors before I have the final right of say.
I'd like to concur with Councillor Havel's very heartfelt statement. I think we are here to do a job. We've been elected to do that, and some of these proceedings have been malicious in intent and causing stress to staff and elected members alike. Obviously, Councillor Havel has put his case very well, and I cannot add to that, but thank him for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Havel has added most of the bullet points about why we chose what we did in employing the ex-Chief Executive Stephen Parry as an interim chief executive, and a decision that we made, I believe, was the best interest of the district. And his points were about the workload that was currently happening at the moment, especially just a 1 month out from Christmas period. I can assure the residents of this district that I've put everything 110% into council. I make these decisions not lightly, and I make sure that what I'm saying and doing is in the best interest, not only of every ratepayer, but of the whole, of the whole district. And I believe what we did was the correct thing to do until such time as we got to the point about employing a new chief executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Dixon and then Councillor McPhail.
I just have one comment to make about the petition, actually, because stated in the petition it says the unwillingness to work with elected members. That's the CEO's unwillingness. That is not a correct statement. That is a false statement.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPhail.
Yes, just through Your Worship, a couple of comments. I think it's been covered quite thoroughly by the other councillors. I think what we're seeing here today is some stability. Only today we see in the media that the Christchurch CEO is not returning to his position. Commentary there. Her position. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll let you correct me there. But we see that, and the bottom line is that we need some stability amongst our senior management team. We've got a good team there, and it was a decision that had to be made. And it gives us that continuity, and it's sad that we have to sit here today and there'll be members of the community thinking that we're digging holes and thinking we should resign, and the various emails that we receive. So be it. We are members of this community. We don't deserve some of the abuse we get, but that's a fact of life. When we line up and climb the ladder, more of us is bed. So I think we need to get on with it. There's been some great commentary there from Councillor Havel. The biggest thing that we need to reassure the community is we need to meet our statutory requirements. If we haven't got a senior management team that can actually work, I don't think you'd be worrying about myself or Mayor Bell, because if we don't meet our requirements, our council can be taken over by other people, other government agencies. So we do need that stability. So it's about all of us, not just the collective group that sits here and people every week think that we're making decisions and votes around personalities or conflicts. We're actually trying to do the best for the community. And I think you need to think about that instead of continually looking in the rear vision mirror at what's happened in the past. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDonnell.
I concur with Councillor McPhail's comments. Stability is what we need. We need to find a good new CEO, and if we end up scrapping and fighting over things, we're just going to end up getting not the right applicants to come here. So we need to get over this and move forward and get on with the job of finding a new CEO.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? All happy? Oh, Councillor Paul McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I just add my support to that. I've just written down here, and it may not be right, but I've never witnessed a more vindictive, revengeful, unrelenting, bitter campaign in my life. Saddens me to be part of this community. We are trying to do the best we can. So I do support what Councillor Havell and everyone else has said.
Thank you, councillors. Going to refrain from talking about Steve in particular for employment matters' sake, and for clarity I will be abstaining from the vote for that exact reason. What I will say to reassure the public is if you do have concerns, we are recruiting for a new chief executive. It is out there at the moment. That is a process that continues. There is stability in the organisation at the moment from what I can see. Myself and the chief executive have a good arrangement in place. We're used to that. We're working through that, and I'll leave it at that at this stage. I'll just keep it neutral. As Stuart rightly said, there's an employment process in the midst at the moment, and we need to do best by that. If there's no further comments, I will put the motion, which as it stands is to reject the petition. Correct? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Aye. I will be abstaining. It's okay. Thank you, councillors. Something a bit more cheery. Presentation from Charmy. Presentation from Great South. If you want to come to the front. Will you need the projector? And welcome to Gore. Good to have you back.
I do have Bobby Brown with me as well.
One speak. No.
Thank you.
I know your voice is loud.
Thank you. We have a PowerPoint. Ah, thank you. I know. So I might have to take the.
We'll just have a quick 2-minute break in between, just so that people can, just have a second. When you're... Oh, I haven't even got it up. When you're ready, Charlie, take it away.
I'm just waiting for the presentation to load, sorry. Oh, yeah, so, thank you. Kia ora koutou. Ko chami tōku ingoa. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me and my esteemed colleague, Bobby Brown, to speak to you. I'm extremely privileged and honoured to be here today. I've been hoping to get in front of the council for a while. I've been in the job as the Chief Executive of Great South for about a year, and it's been one of my key sort of deliverables that I wanted to have more engagement with our councils, especially those funding councillors, so that you are aware of what we do and how we support you and your district. So what we would want to do today is very quickly run through some of the stuff that has happened, a little bit about Great South. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of exactly what we do. We've done a significant piece of work over the last 18 months, which is called Beyond 2025, and I did meet some of the councillors, and of course His Worship, the Mayor, was with us at the launch of that particular long-term plan, but it's a long-term plan for our region. And so we were hoping to have, Bobby will take us through a bit of that information and how it has and will impact Gore District Council will be highlighted here. And I'd like to end really just about the long-term, the letter of expectation and the statement of intent process that we're going through at the moment. Of course, identifying some of our challenges and putting that forward for the council to consider at the next council meeting, I believe. We will have a paper up to the council for consideration then. So this is just for your information. Please feel free to shout out with any questions you may have. I'm more than happy to take it at that time, or we can take it at the end. I'm easy, so you let me know what you would like me to do. Right, so really Great South is a council-controlled organisation with 9 shareholders, out of which we have what we call the Class A shareholders, or our funding shareholders, which is Invercargill City Council, Southland District Council, Gore District Council, and the Regional Council, Environment Southland. We also have 5 other shareholders, SIT, ILT, Mataura Licensing Trust, the Chamber of Commerce, and we also have a member organisation, the Community Trust of Community Trust Southland, sorry. And they provide us with some funding for investigation and impetus activities. So our vision has been to build even better lives through sustainable regional development. And we, as an organisation, are now currently 4 years old, sorry. We morphed from what was Venture Southland into Great South in 2019. And when we moved into Great South, we became a council-controlled organisation. At that point, there was a new board that was appointed, a commercially astute board that was tasked with directing Great South to make the best business decisions so that we could see the best return on investment for our region. Recently, what we have done is we held a few workshops with our joint shareholders, and these are the new priorities that have come out of the latest workshop was in September. The one before that was in May this year, so we've had 2 this year, and really looking at regional development leadership. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about the Beyond 2025 long-term plan that will set a foundation for how we as a Southland region as a whole can move up and move forward and develop. We look at regional promotion. We also provide business support and diversification, and we also work with our businesses to take them along the net zero or the decarbonisation journey as we, as a country, have signed up to the Paris Agreement, as you'll know. So we've got a commitment to become net zero by 2050. Great South has been dabbling in this area for a number of years, and we've already issued several strategies on how we can get there. We have a net zero Southland strategy, and part of the work that we do here is to incorporate that strategy and bring it to life. This is us. So I'm up there. Bobby leads our Beyond 2025 team. Project. She's no longer has a team, sorry. It's only her. Times are tough. Resources are hard to come by, so we've got to make some sacrifices. Steve Canny, he's, and I'm sure he's known to many of you, GM of Strategic Projects. Mark was taken on to fill Bobby's old position of Tourism and Events, and we have a new GM of Finance, IT and Facilities, Suzanne. Suzanne comes to us from PowerNet, and before that she was with Environment Southland, so has some experience in local government. I came to Great South from SIT, so I've lived in New Zealand for 13 years. Out of that, 12 years I was at SIT. I first came as an international student and then stayed on, and I was employed by them, and when I left SIT, I was on the senior management team leading international education, marketing, pastoral care, various other things. It's a really long story. You don't want to hear that. Anyway, so in a nutshell, this is kind of like where we are. We delve into those 4 or 5 areas that we spoke about. Regional development, business support, that generally falls under strategic projects. Mark handles everything tourism and events, and as I mentioned before, Bobby is Beyond 2025, but everything that Bobby does underpins the other areas as well. In 2022 and 2023, and I'm conscious that I'm putting this up, it's about a year old, but this is because I haven't had a chance to be in front of the council before. But Gore District Council gave us over $200,000. The total funding in that particular year was quite high. We had 7.6 million, out of which you can see we had other sources. So during COVID, because you had a regional development agency, this region was able to get over $7 million in government funding over the COVID period. So helped support the businesses to stay afloat, helped support tourism, helped support with very many different strategies and working plans that we have now established. In 2023, your funding went up to 222,000. However, our total funding did come down to be a little over 6 million. And again, we had government funding that came through. However, most of those contracts are now at an end or closing at the end of this year. Now, as I mentioned before, the government assisted many regions. Great South owns and operates 2 regional tourism organisations, Visit Fiordland and Visit Southland. And because of that, we were actually able to get a little bit more money than some of the other RTOs and the other regions, which is a bit of a sore point, but hell, the money came to us and that's what we wanted. So this is where the money came from, the STAP funding. We had regional events funding, and that will go on until June 2024. And then we had tourism communities and some recovery support that came through. So again, if we didn't have a central organisation that was controlled by the councils but acted independently, we wouldn't have got this money into our region. So it's important to understand why we as an organisation exist for you. Regional leadership. So this leads us on to our Beyond 2025 plan, and I'll hand it over to Bobby Brown to take over.
No one likes seeing a photo of themselves, that's for sure. But like, hi guys, nice to be back again. Obviously I'm from Gore, so this is home. But look, I'm just going to run through 7 or 8 slides just to give you an update, and apologies to some people who know a bit more than others. But this is a very important piece of work. So it was launched in July or end of June this year. So it's called Beyond 2025 Southland Regional Long-Term Plan. So look, it came from a background of TY saying they were going to close, and the government saying, right, we've got to support Southland to look at, you know, what's after TY, you know, how can we help look at different diversification opportunities. So it brought a whole lot of people together, and the result was 7 work streams, one of which was saying, right, let's put a long-term lens over everything else. Great South then put their hand up and said, we'll help facilitate that, and this piece of work happened. At the same time, we had completed almost 2/3 of all the things that were in our previous regional development strategy, which, if you recall, was called SWORDS. And so it was, we thought, right, let's be clever and put these 2 things together so that we just had clarity with one strategic regional document, and that's what happened. So the reason why our faces are up there is because we're very lucky to have recently won a national award with Economic Development New Zealand for Best Integrated Strategy. So we're quite proud of that, because sometimes you know you're doing a good job, you've talked to a lot of people, but it's always good to get that acknowledged by your peers. So look, just really quickly, there was a lot of work that went into developing this plan, and I often say the process to develop it was probably more important than what it says. So there were 16 work streams, there were 4 advisory groups. They went from environment and climate change through to community, economic, marketing, local business support, and of course population. That basically shows that a lot of stuff happened. So 9 public road shows, over 20 hui with mana whenua, over 50 reports and pieces of research were reviewed as part of this. And 20 pieces of separate primary research were undertaken, from a regional energy assessment, a housing needs assessment, which I'll show you in a second, through to talking to local businesses. We did some work on volunteers. So we really tried to be clever and cover lots of different parts. And I don't know if clever was the word, but that's just showing that we didn't sort of pull this stuff out of fresh air. It's based on fact and insight as much as we can. I'd like to acknowledge Gore District Council staff and some of the councillors, because we would not have got this quality piece of work if a lot of staff had not very generously given us their time. In particular, Anne Poller, Steve, chairing the Housing Advisory Group, your expertise was just absolutely invaluable, and I think that's as a result of where we are now with the housing situation. But Anne negotiated a lot of stuff for us with other council staff like Jason, Rex, Sonia, lots of people. So thank you so much for that. We know you had a lot on, but again, wouldn't have got to this stage without you. So what that slide just shows is different staff touching different parts of the plan. In terms of the plan, I won't go into too much, but look, it's pretty basic. It's about 3 aspirations based on our people, our economy, and our environment. So things like, we're going to look after the place we live in because it's how we prosper. Things like making sure that our people are happy and healthy, and that we have fairness and equity and social well-being. And things like the economy, that we remain a powerhouse for the country, but we also make sure we've got jobs for people, and that we've diversified our economy, so if we've got a lot of eggs in one basket, we're not hurt when that basket might change. So that's basically just a summary of how it all turned out. We identified 5 key enablers because sometimes with these strategies you end up with a lot of things in it. We wanted to make sure that the big 5 were focused on and got priority. So no surprises here, or I hope no surprises, but you've got housing, we'll talk about that in a second. We've got workforce, particularly with an unemployment rate which fluctuates below 3%, which is a structural baseline. You've got data, energy and regulatory and planning, which does acknowledge that there's a lot coming at councils and across the whole community, and that is having an impact. But it also acknowledges that if we want things to happen regionally, the rules have to enable or understand what they are. So for you guys, look, there's a lot of alignment between the regional plan and what your aspirations are, and again, we've got that because your staff are involved. But things like, look, our region is built on the connection between our urban and our rural communities. Really important, but that obviously means a lot of stuff has to enable that to happen. Talking about embracing change because we're connected and resilient, and we talked about things like Gore Kids Hub, you know, facilities which allow people to be together, the multi-sports complex. You know, you guys have done really well here with the breadth and quality of your facilities. And again, what I talked about before with being exposed to large employers or industry changing. So there were a couple of sections in the plan, and I forgot to bring some today. Gosh, tragedy. But I can definitely get some copies to you in the online. But around community, workforce, tourism, and that focus on rural communities. So lots of stuff that you're doing fits into the regional picture, and the regional picture validates and endorses your work. So one of the big things we did was trying to understand now who our people are and trying to get an understanding of who our people will be in the future. So that's really important, and your council staff do this already, but that's important when you're thinking of infrastructure you've got to provide, housing, etc. So what we tried to do was to link the councils up, you know, so that we had a common understanding across the whole region. So we did 5 baseline reports for you guys with Infometrics support, and then we had that crystal ball out thinking about what the future might look like. So this is not a surprise, backs up all the stuff that Anne and the team have probably been talking to you about, but you have a very, very old and ageing population, and that will continue in line with the rest of the country and the world, in fact. Okay, another biggie was housing. So we did a full audit of every house in the region, and there's about 46,000 homes. Gore has about 5,500, and that number can fluctuate because it depends if trusts own them and that sort of thing. So what we do, we can tell you a lot about what type of houses you have, where they are, who lives in them. So why is this important? For lots of reasons, but it's also important because tourism events are quite big for you guys, and 2% of your housing stock is Airbnb, for example. So not quite as good as Te Anau, which has 16%. I don't know if good's the word there, because it does present a challenge when you're trying to house staff. Okay, so what we did was we looked at your housing supply. So we looked at lots of different ways that your housing could be grouped. We looked at affordability, so understanding how people can afford properties, how you guys compare to the rest of the region, because that, of course, fits into when you're trying to attract workforce. And we looked at future projections, which looks at build rates, efficiencies, etc. So this is an electronic tool which we developed through the housing group, and it's out of date at the moment you develop it. So we're going to look at trying to get a consistent way to have this information available to council and developers and others. Last slide, I feel, or maybe second last. We've also done something called a commercial accommodation audit, which basically means we count the number of rooms and commercial properties for you guys, and we have a good chat to your operators. So this is really important because, you know, you want to bring events, tourism into the region. You can clip the ticket if they can stay. If they can't, they'll just keep going through and stay somewhere else. So look, over COVID, you've recovered quite well. So your number of rooms has stayed pretty consistent. And just a few homestays have actually stopped operating as homestays is probably the biggest trend here. Last slide. So in terms of the plan being launched, we've got 4 priorities that we're working on in the next 6 months. So housing is obviously very big because we want to look at regionally, how do we measure success? How do we deal with this very complex issue? So there's a whole lot in there around action plans, supply programs, making it easy for developers, but even just sharing the information. There's also a lot of a focus on homeowners. So we've got some of the oldest housing stock in the country. So 73% of all of our homes were built prior to 1980. So we'll have to replace about 10,000 homes at some point up to 2050. So what we want to do is help homeowners know where they can get different energy, and retrofit, pink bats. There's actually a lot of good work already happening with the South and Warm Homes Trust, etc. The other project is a data dashboard and repository, so lots of information. We're just trying to make a one-stop shop so it's easy for people to find it and to inform decisions. There's some work on water, so we're working with the Regional Council Environment Southland, just trying to understand and support their mahi and the energy strategy, and what happens with energy linked to decarbonisation is obviously quite key. Particularly with the National Energy Strategy underway. And of course we generate in the south, they need it in the north. It's got to get there, but we're obviously quite keen to understand what we need as a region to reach net zero by 2050. And there's definitely a plan, as Charmy said, around net zero Southland with that, but it's really pleasing that we've already abated 14.8%, which is fantastic. So a lot of the private sector have really stood up and are embracing that change. Finished.
Thank you. So just going quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to touch on this. Won't speak too much about it, but there will be facts and figures specifically associated with Gore. Marketing means that we will promote campaigns across the country, sometimes overseas, to encourage visitors to come through to our part of the world. We also host the FAMILS, and I think the most recent famous person to come down was the Hoff. We will be rolling out a thing called the Ambassador Program, where we intend to have front-facing, first-line staff encourage anybody that they engage with and speak to them about what is good about your region. So they will have specifics about Gore to speak to visitors that come into Gore. Destination development is really around our products for tourism, and how we can make our tourism more sustainable and of a value to us as well as to the visitor. We very recently launched, last week actually, the destination, Muriku Southland destination strategy in Gore. Unfortunately, the first time around when we wanted to come, there were floods, so we weren't able to. And there's a whole range of products and activities that we have within that strategy that we intend to implement for Gore. Events is another key area. As you know, you've got quite a few unmissable events over the calendar, and this will encourage tourism. Tourism encourages workforce to come here. Workforce will then, support our economic development initiatives. We have launched the events strategy, and we also have a calendar of events, especially the unmissable events. So what we're trying to do, one of the other programs that we have is partnered with 7 other RTOs in the lowest part of the South Island and established what is called the Southern Way. And we want people to stop and slow down and actually take time to go through our region. And there will be certain itineraries that will be available alongside these events so that people will stay longer in your region and support your economic development. Business events is a key area that we understand that we can promote visitors to our region in the off-season, so it doesn't give too much stress on our peak seasons during summer, and it also encourages people to stay here for about 3, 4, 5 days, pre and post events, to come out into this part of the world as well. Business support and diversification is really 2 key areas that we have in this, that we have activated over the last few years, is the regional business Regional Business Partnership Program, which is a contract with MB, and through that we support businesses with capability building. And these are some of the figures for 2023 and 2024 to date, specifically for Gore. But overall, over a year, we will meet with about 150 businesses to determine their capabilities and to provide them with one-on-one assistance. But we will have more than about 250 to 280 business engagements. So it's quite a significant piece of work that we do there. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about the Southland Youth Futures program. Southland Youth Futures goes into our schools across our Murihiku region, and we work with students to identify career opportunities. There are two different aspects to this. We deliver a thing called the Work Ready Passport, and we also provide events. The events allow our students to understand what it really means to be in a particular industry, to become an arborist, for example, or to become a vet, or to, be a waiter. So ILT, they have various different games or various different methodologies that students engage with to understand whether they can actually carry a plate without a tray of stuff without dropping it. So a very engaging tool, and we've engaged with over 2,600 students across the region last year. And that's the Work Ready Passport program. So we're working with the high schools here, and of course offered professional talks to the schools as well. Net Zero Southland, I touched very quickly on this. We've got a number of programs that we provide to businesses to support them to embark on a decarbonisation journey. So we've only had one Gore business so far to get onto that program, so there will be greater concentration to bring other businesses along on this journey. And we had a second win in about 4 weeks. Last Friday, the sustainability program won an award from Business South in Dunedin, so recognising businesses across Southland and Otago. It was for the decarbonisation program because we've already had 74 businesses engaged. But as Bobby mentioned before, overall our region has reduced our carbon emissions by 14.8% from our baseline in 2018. So it's a significant event, significant effort by many people. What's next? Looking ahead, right, so this is really, as I mentioned before, resources are tight, our costs are quite high. One thing I didn't mention in my presentation is that Great South owns space operations. Space operations engages in satellite observation, data exchange. So if you use your phone and you get onto your GPS, those signals predominantly would have come through the satellites that we download data from in Bluff. So Space Operations actually pulled out as an independent company in 2021, and they've been in operation now for a little over a year, so it was October 21 when they moved into that stance. So prior to that, Space Operations actually enabled us to cover any shortfalls that we faced from funding. Now that that's gone, now that the government funding has gone and COVID funding has gone, we find that we do have a bit of a shortfall. This year, in 2023-24 year, we will be covering that difference of $200,000 or $210,000 with our cash reserves, but that brings our cash reserves right down to the area that we need to be in order to keep us afloat. So if you look at the breakdown, of course, and this is Gore District has very kindly committed to $60,000 for contract funding this year and for next year. And for next year, we're looking at our core overheads being 1.9 million and putting a request forward through to see if you would have an opportunity to look at roughly contributing about 10%. Based on Great South's shareholder agreement, the core funding is divided by the 4 funding councils, 50% from Invercargill City Council, 30% from SDC, 10% from Gore, and 10% from Environment Southland. But that is being under review at the moment, so the outcome of it, I'm not really sure what will happen, but whatever it is, it will be implemented in 2025, 26. And so if we were to request Gore to consider a slight increase to their core contribution, that would be around an additional $35,000 from you to us. That will enable us to keep us in the, it'll just be, we're breaking even if we do that. So that's me, and I'm happy to take questions. Bobby's happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, both Charmy and Bobby. Sadly not as exciting for me as I've heard most of the information, but I'm sure councillors would have indulged in that. Councillors, do we have any questions? We have prematurely arranged a bit of a workshop possibly in the future with Charmy. Am I jumping the gun a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay, we definitely can organise a workshop with Charmy if there are quite a few questions from councillors here today. I know that we have quite a big agenda, but I will allow questions to flow now. Yep, Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, I'll just make a point because I was tasked with getting out to councillors to see if they had any questions, but I had a glitch in the matrix and I only got my computer working properly yesterday. But with this other meeting coming up, I think it might be more appropriate if those questions that I have, and I'll give you an update, it's around the oat plant, are made then. Because you use the words regional development leadership. Correct. And to me no leadership was shown there. So
I'll jump in there for Charmy, and we can possibly get Ian along as well, but that would probably be a better conversation to have in a workshop. It'll mean that the team can get into
Yes, and unfortunately it's not something that I am responsible for, so I will bring Ian around, and I think it is a good opportunity for us to discuss that at that workshop.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Stringer.
Thanks, guys, for your presentation there. Just, Bobby, the figures that you're showing on the screen there, do we have access to that as councillors? Like, you'll send us a link through that we can get to?
Yeah, your staff have got.
Yep, cool. Thank you.
Any further questions for the team? I imagine everyone's probably holding back for a later date. Councillor Gardine.
I just noticed the Space Ops was a very profitable operation and going ahead quite well, and now you've passed it on. Why wasn't the profits kept back in the business to cover these rises?
We decided, well, I didn't decide, the board decided to go down that avenue so that there's opportunity for greater growth. As a part of Great South, they wouldn't have had the ability to grow to the extent and as quickly as they wanted to. So currently, with Space Ops standing alone, they've also taken over Warkworth in Auckland, which has opened up a whole new dimension of space observation. So we're now able to go into deep space, and we're also able to go into Earth observation, which will enable us, like in case of drastic weather events, on how the effects of any floods or tsunamis, or you know, it could be a earthquake or whatever it is. So we are able to now invest and put that money back into that company. There will be some capital that is required for Space Ops, but it will enable an exponential growth and a much, much larger return on investment, which will help us to then reduce the reliance on the ratepayers' money. So the ultimate goal is that whatever we can do to reduce the reliance on ratepayers' money is where we're going to be trying to head to.
Thank you, Charmy, and thank you, Councillor. I'll just jump in there as well. I think, again, Ian's probably a pretty good person to talk to why the board made that decision. And just for clarification, Great South still owns 100% of Space Ops, so just a separate entity.
That's right. Yes, we do. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bobby, a question for you. Thank you both, you and Charmy, for coming up and speaking. But it's just something maybe to keep in mind for the future going forward. Many people in our community, and most of the ratepayers that I speak to around this issue, is housing. We have a lot of renters that are ageing quite rapidly. Many of them are actually female, and many of them actually only have the pension to rely on. And even if accommodation is available, it's actually quite often out of their reach. They live hand to mouth. So going forward, I would like Great South to perhaps look at options around that for the Gore district, specifically for us. Thank you.
Good point, and Paula is already working with those groups as well, so in partnership we'll definitely address that.
Thank you, councillors. One last question for the team. We'll try and keep this moving along. Thank you very much. We'll likely see you again very shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Moving right along to the minutes of the Great South Joint Shareholders Committee meeting. Do we have any questions with those minutes? Could I move the minutes be received? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Any further comments? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Number 8, Chief Executive Recruitment Subcommittee on page 85. Would the Deputy Mayor like to speak to this memo at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the memo is self-explanatory. At a previous meeting, it was agreed there'd be some terms of reference drawn up, and they show up on pages 86 and 87. So in terms of the recommendations that are there, that the report be received, but I wish to amend the second one, and the reason for that is that at the bottom of page 87, or bottom of 86 and 87, it sets out limitations of the subcommittee, and I'd like to add another limitation, and it'd be a separate one without the little dash of the bullet points, and that is that the chair of the subcommittee does not have a casting vote. So the intent is that we'll be 4 on the committee, and the key task of the committee is to reduce the number of applicants to a long list and then to a short list for a recommendation to council. By not having, the intent is it be done by consensus, but if a full majority isn't reached, if 2 out of the 4 feel a name should go forward, then that's what will happen. So the Mayor, the Chair of the subcommittee, and myself had talkies and reached the view that that was an appropriate thing in this case. So I would move that the report be received, and subject to the addition of the chair of the subcommittee doesn't have a casting vote, that the terms of reference as set out on pages 86, 87 be adopted, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll look for a seconder before we get into debate. Councillor Dixon, open for debate, questions, etc. Looks like we're all happy. I'm getting nods all around. Just for clarification for the public, that this is, as Councillor Havel said, just the long list and the short list. Every single councillor will be interviewing the final whatever number is at the end, so the short list, whether it's 4, 5, 6, who knows. So every single councillor will have involvement at the end of that process to select the Chief Executive, just to make that very clear. Nice and easy. Any questions? No, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Proposed legislative amendment to cancel/defer the 2020 long-term plan on page 88. Would the Chief Executive like to speak to this report at all?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. As you know, you asked me to
prepare this report, it's fair to say that the spectre of the preparing a long-term plan in the current environment with Three Waters reform now very, very uncertain, because the previous government had got to a stage where it had passed legislation which was going to create 10 new entities to deliver and govern water in New Zealand and wastewater. And of course, the government that is hopefully in the advanced phases of formation has said, well, certainly the major party has said, the National Party, that they will scrap Three Waters. And the best that I can discern is that they're talking about the creation of regional, local CCOs. But in the meantime, the business of the council has to continue, and it struck us way back in April, actually, at the Zone 5 and 6 local government meeting in Queenstown, where I raised this issue, and I think Councillor Stringer and his worship were there amongst other councils. It got a reasonable amount of support then, but I think a lot of councils probably didn't actually think it was such a burning problem then. But fast forward 6 months, and I was at the Rural and Provincial Council meeting in early November with Councillor Hovell, and yes, the grip of fear and uncertainty amongst certainly my colleagues about how we're going to prepare this long-term plan with such marked uncertainty, with Three Waters earmarked for being scrapped in terms of the law, but the council's been charged with administering the law as we know it now, and trying to credibly put out 10 years worth of forecasting, where you think that the rug could easily be taken from under you with a policy change of the government. So my view has always been, well, why don't you just simply scrap the need for an LTP and carry on with an annual plan, and literally just for this term of council would mean that every council in New Zealand would just be reliant on the long-term plan that was cast nearly 3 years ago. And I guess I'm hinting in this report that it might not be such a bad thing, because you could experience not having to do a long-term plan, and then you might actually reflect and think, well, do we need to do it every 3 years? And the key for a long-term plan is that at the moment we're obligated to do what I would call a first principles review. Like it's not just a light once-over, it's an absolute deep dive to review all aspects of your long-term plan, your asset management plans, your activity management plans, your infrastructure strategy, your finance strategy, your performance measures, the assumptions that you are operating within. All those things are critically reviewed every 3 years, and it's now taking about half of that period, 18 months, to get through that review process. So I know that a lot of colleagues are fatigued. The process currently, in my view, is horrendously constipated, and it's been captured by the bureaucracy, and it's not rewarding innovation or creativity. It's actually rewarding compliance, and it is a slog. And over the years, I've seen this evolve from financial auditing, which is focused mainly on your forecasting and your underlying assumptions, now to actually telling us what issues we should be parading before the community, the options under each issue, the wordsmithing of them, and it just seems to be overkill. So that's my 20 years of experience as a chief executive speaking. Whether it has the support of the council is a moot point. I've allowed myself to get outside my bureaucratic cage and tell a little bit like it is, and hopefully with this situation we find ourselves in, we can kick for touch on the LTP, still have all the supporting information that we're already working on, but allow us to actually not get a severely qualified LTP, either because we've not complied with the late released law, or the public think it's a nonsense because we're compliant with the law, but everyone knows that law is not going to last for very long. So it's putting us in a horrendous situation. So that's my overarching comments, Your Worship, and look forward to the councillor's reaction.
Thank you for that, Steve. Really appreciate the dialogue and actually the report as well. It's not often that I read a report and actually enjoy myself. I did enjoy your reference to the Rugby World Cup in there as well. I totally agree. The way I've looked at it in simplistic terms is we've got to notify our long-term plan next year and then put it into action in the middle of next year. Now, if this incoming government, like they have so said, change what is currently there, we're going to notify and develop a plan. As soon as it's locked in, that's it. We can't just change little things. We can't take out a third of it or put a third of it back in. So this really needs to be sorted out at this end of it. So whether it's a pause or a deferral or whatever, some sort of action needs to happen here. Otherwise, I was thinking upon a rates workshop this week and thinking if we advertise our rates from 2025 without water in them, it's going to seem like a massive discount. But the public has no idea how they're actually going to pay for their water because it's got to be paid for somehow. So I don't really want to advertise it's going to be a discount on rates and then there's another bill somewhere else. So I think there needs to be some action. Really keen to hear what councillors have to think and what that action may look like if there is support for this and starting to understand the implications of a move like this. I'll open it to the floor. Councillor Hovell. Oh. Councillor someone? Councillor Hovell.
Yeah, thank you. There are three options before us as I see it. Number one is to speak out as we're doing today, so you can tick the box, and I would hope that the press pick up on it and talk to other councils and see what their views are on that. Number two is to use the contacts we have through other councils, through Local Government New Zealand and through the zones and through the mayoral forum and those avenues to actively promote a hold on the long-term plan at this stage. And option three is to write to the new minister once he's appointed, really taking the crux out of what's in the Chief Executive's report and posing the questions and doing so in a very public way. The main concern to me is that if you take the staff time into account, we're going to be spending $400,000, $500,000, including the audit fees, on a process that at the end of the day I consider to be a waste of the ratepayers' money, given that we could end up with a document that is, I guess, nugatory without any effect or the ability to actually implement what's there. So I fully support what's in the Chief Executive's report, and I guess I would suggest that the recommendation that's in the report that we consider our role can be expressed in very simple terms, and that is that the council advocates the delay on long-term plans through whatever means is available to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just before I flick to the next speaker, so those avenues are a mayoral forum, which I think is next Friday, if I remember correctly. There's a zone meeting tomorrow, specifically discussing Three Waters. So if it is endorsed today, both me and Steve can talk about it with the other mayors at that meeting, and a letter to the minister can be written at any time, and support can be gathered from our neighbouring mayors at any time as well. Those are just the different options. Just wanted to pick up on your point there, Councillor, of it won't be a waste of the $400,000, $500,000. Only a third of that has a big question mark over it. There is 2/3 that will be good, but I'm sure that's exactly what you meant.
Yeah, it's not an efficient spend of our ratepayers' money.
Agreed. Anybody else? Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. At our last term of council, and I was the one that voted against this coming forward in any form whatsoever, and all I said then was it was going to cost the poor ratepayers money, and the less money that we can spend on situations that we don't have to without government giving us some clear indications of where they want to go, then I think this is a fine start. And thank you to the Chief Executive for the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve. It's a good report and it's a smart idea. I just hope you get credit for it nationally, actually. The thing is, change is swift and costs are escalating, and we're a very small council and we know how bogged down we can get with those costs. So I would actually like to just hope that the recommendation is accepted by all of the members present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I totally agree with this. This is just bureaucracy and a waste of spending. I'm concerned in point 4, you say 40% of councils are actually proceeding down the line that the government is going to change what's happening. I think they're kicking a football that's flat, but this is, I'm concerned. I made notes down there and I just kept writing down cost. What does this cost? What does this cost? And the second to that, where does the auditor get his powers from? Is this, do they make them up, or?
The Auditor General, Councillor.
I understand that, but some of the questions they seem to be asking are beyond what their remit is.
Agreed. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with everybody else because I think that strategic plans are really on the way out because they're not living documents, and you have this plan for 10 years and you have a government changing, as we've seen, and with Three Waters and the RMA and all these other important policies coming out of government. So I would totally support this recommendation, and to Steve too. I think it's a very thorough, good report, very easily understood, and I would like to see us go ahead with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor McPhail, another sporting reference, is it?
Yeah, just for Your Worship, I have to start with saying it's obviously money well spent to have a CEO produce this report in line with some of the discussions we've just had previously in the meeting, and the obviously the knowledge base that's in there comes through in that report. So the only thing I was going to say, we look at cancellation, deferral, delay, abolish. So what are we actually looking at? Do we do a delaying action? Do we do cancellation? Do we do the deferral, or go for the stick with what the recommendation is to abolish it? So really try and work out the recommendation that we want to look at and the stand that we make as the council. It's clearly there. We're probably at the right time. The environment that we're going to lead into sits at the best position, and maybe that's probably just the decision we need to make.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Steve jump in a second. I'd be interested to get the feedback of actually leaving it open-ended. If we're going to go to our neighbouring councils and try and develop something, it might be better if we all contribute towards a consensus to then pass on to the Minister, so that there's more councillors who are in agreement and we can push it on. We can come with I'd hate to come to a definite, we want to abolish it, and then everyone else is like, oh, we just want to defer, and then we all get mixed messages. But yeah, leave it over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think the preference is cancellation of the 2024 LTP, so there's no need to do an LTP, but with that would mean that just there has to be an amendment to legislation to say, recognising the uncertain state of affairs, you cancel the need for an LTP, you substitute it with an annual plan. I think deferral is, unless it's booting it forward 3 years, it's going to be problematic because then you'll have LTP being prepared in an election year or an LTP being prepared in year 1 of a new council term, and I think that would be awkward. So I think my recommendation for pragmatic reasons would be a cancellation, replaced with annual plan, and then the long-term plan continues as normal in 27. And the need for ongoing reviews and the content, that's probably a separate debate for a later day. I just think it's actually getting in there and saying, we recognise it's uncertain, councils can actually just prepare an annual plan in 2024, and there's no legislative penalty associated with doing that. That's the principal thing. But I'm hopeful that it might spawn a conversation, going back to Councillor Fraser's point, about the scope of audits, because what we started with in these hopeful days of 2006 and what we've now arrived at in 23 is night and day in terms of the involvement of audit and the cost that keeps rising with it.
Steve, and thank you, Councillor. And that came up when this report was created. Of the timing's kind of perfect with the Future for Local Government conversation as well. To Councillor Fraser's point, it can be added into those conversations around whether LTPs are fit for purpose these days and whether the audit is fit for purpose as well. Councillor Gardine and then Councillor Havell.
We've probably just got to watch though that government hasn't formed, and government's moved very slowly, and we have got a process in place that has to be finished by mid next year. So and a lot of councils have geared up themselves to do that business and get it done, and we're probably just a minnow. We can have some influence, but just be careful that we don't think that it'll just happen. Because government is a very slow process and there's lots of other things on the agenda that'll come in front of us.
That's a good point, Councillor Gardine. I think to reassure everyone, including staff, is that we will still box on with the LTP until central government tells us otherwise. As I think as mentioned in this report, we are part of the 60% who will not trying to guess what the law is. We are sticking to the law and continuing to take it out in 2025. I'm going to let Councillor McPhail go first, if that's right. Councillor Havell? Yeah. Councillor McPhail?
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, Councillor Havell. I'm grabbing the bull by the horns. I think we've got to show what we want. I think I like the report. I think the council bit is great. I'm all for it. We've got to show what we want, look, and be first footing, not back footing.
I'm going to go Councillor Strang because it's spoken yet, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Havell. Oh, cool. Fantastic.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, look, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. We carry on with the process, so we work with the LTP, we get it to the stage where it's due for sign-off, then we all vote against it, saying that this is not what we want for the community, or it's not practical going forward. What is the outcome of such a process? That is sending a very strong message through to central government.
His Worship just whispered in my ear, Commissioners. You need to adopt an LTP to lawfully set your rates, and so what this is suggesting is a legislative change so that we can get to a point in end of June, and that won't be necessary, but we'll still have to have an annual plan. If the law hasn't changed by then, that's the way it is, but I think there will be a realisation that it's going to be an unholy mess where, I mean, this Three Waters reform of the last government has got a phased rollout, so there are entities that are going to be, some councils are going to be waving, in theory, goodbye to their Three Waters function as early as next year, and yet there's legislative forces at play to actually remove that and unwind it all. So I think it's just what we need to be working in parallel here. So we say, well, we think we should be cancelling this LTP. We'll still work on developing LTP, but it's going to create a massive confusion with the public when we go out, particularly if there are proclamations or statements made by well-placed sources in the government saying, well, we won't be doing this, we'll be doing something else. And we'll be the meat and the sandwich because we're obliged to follow law, but we have a sense that the law may well change. So hence the easier way is just to cancel the need for an LTP, put in place your annual plan, and then you can still lawfully then levy your rates and crack on with things pending the clarity of the law change. Because it's one thing saying you'll scrap something, but then you've got to put something else in its place. And it's taken the last government 5 years to get where it got. So I don't think it'll be a 5-minute exercise. But back to your point, Councillor, if we get to end of June and I'm still around here and you've got a recommendation to adopt an LTP, I'll be begging you to adopt it, whether you agree to it or not, because we'll need to get that done to actually lawfully set our rates.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Steve, which will make it interesting for those councillors who accept a long-term plan with their 3 waters in for the 3 years. Councillor Hovell. Is there anyone else before we do this recommendation? All yours, Councillor Hovell.
I'd like to move that the report be received and that the council seeks cancellation of the 2024 long-term plan with reliance on annual plans until 2027.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good recommendation. I'm more just envisioning how it's going to go with my other mayoral peers. Are you wanting, sorry, as the whole council, are we wanting to stick on that very firmly, or are we looking to put that in as our entry point and see what our neighbours think and try and come to a consensus? What's the feeling from the room? Oh, did you move that? Yes. Sorry, seconder, please. Councillor Richard McPhail. Open for debate. Do we have I'm just thinking about if we're going to this meeting tomorrow to advocate for it, are we drawing a line in the sand, or are we... sorry, Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Your Worship. Why 2027? Is there any particular time frame around that? I know negotiations aim high and you can work back, but...
So the long-term plans are prepared every 3 years in the second year of the council's term. So what it's saying is, picking up what the Chief Executive says, is let's park the current one and do another one in 2027 and rely on the annual plans until then. And my wording of that the council seek leaves it open as to the mechanisms that we use to get there, and I talked about those before.
Sorry, just 2 questions. One for clarification. So that means that all of the options I was listing out, you want advocacy? So mayoral forum, the meeting tomorrow, and a letter to the minister? That's...
Yes, and as I said, it's just the council seeks. So the council seeks through whatever means is available to it. So there's other things I referred before.
Do you mind if we put that in a recommendation so we know exactly what we can have seeks in general, but including, just so we know...
Okay, well, I'm happy to add that the council seek cancellation of the 2024 long-term plan with reliance on the annual plans until 2027 through...
and I would say and that the council endorses the Mayor and Chief Executive to represent the council's view at upcoming zone meetings and also mayoral forum, and that the Mayor and Chief Executive pen a letter to the Minister.
Once appointed.
Pending, yes, once appointed, pending approval by the council. I'm now just...
Yeah, I think the letter should be approved by the council.
Yep. So a letter drafted to come back to the next council meeting?
Yes.
Yep, cool. So did you get some sort of combination? Yes. Thank you, Councillor. The other one was for the Chief Executive. What would an annual plan look like with all the amount of work that we've done? I know that we're looking at a rates change and things like that. What would that look like? Because I know that Councillor talking about parking it completely and doing an annual, but I'm assuming a lot of what's been done will be put into this annual plan?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. You'd have to still, particularly, as I said, my point with the production of an annual plan, what I've suggested in my report is that at the moment the annual plan is voluntary as to whether you consult on it, particularly if it's not a major variation from your long-term plan. With our rating type proposal, changing the way in which rates are assessed, we would have to go out there and consult with the people. And that's consistent with my suggestion in my report. I don't think we're going to get away with long-term plans for no long-term plan for 6 years and no obligation to consult. I think that's a step too far, and I can rightly can anticipate that type of pushback. But if you committed to consulting your community, and then you could free yourself from some of this other legislative and audit compliance stuff that just bogs the whole process down and actually doesn't engage or excite the community, it would be far easier. So, yeah, that's my proposal. Annual plan, but with a mandatory obligation to consult, particularly if there's a decent variation from what's in your long-term plan.
Thank you, Steve. So that's moved and seconded with those changes. Cool. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Took himself off. Yeah, I think going forward that at whatever meetings or wherever you and the Chief Executive find yourself, I think we have full confidence in that proposal being put clearly and succinctly.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think I've got I would imagine the Chief Executive, we've got a pretty clear vision as to what the Council's wanting, so I think it'll be, yeah, easy to advocate. Well, maybe not easy, but the messaging should be clear. Any further comments? No, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 92, item 10, former Gore landfill, issue of abatement notice. Will the Chief Executive like to speak to this one?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I thought it was timely to come up for public ear in this issue that has been brewing away now for the best part of 3 months. It had come to us as somewhat of a surprise, to be fair. It's not as if the council has been operating under the cloak of darkness in terms of capping the old landfill, and we think it's a pretty exciting project in terms of the ultimate environmental outcome being sought with planting of a native habitat. But we have had this difference of opinion with Environment Southland about whether we are currently compliant. We're, I guess it's fair to say, disappointed that the abatement notice option has been used in the absence of any compelling evidence that environmental harm has been caused. We do have a resource consent application in the system, and we have a mediation plan for the 12th of December, and it's hoped that those two events may actually ultimately resolve the issue, because the council is committing itself to that resource consent application with a willingness to undertake tests and provide the evidence sought and the comfort sought that it's not actually causing harm to the environment. So this is really just for the councillors to be aware of the current state of play, and it's obviously been paraded in a public setting because it's arguably of high public interest, particularly the abatement notice when there was a cease and desist with Green Waste and Cleanfill, which would really have placed us on the back foot in terms of trying to find an alternative location for that, given the high degree of usage, particularly by the public and Green Waste, that is currently being enjoyed.
Thank you, Steve. Questions, councillors? Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, look, got a range of questions here. Where would the fill go if not to the dump there?
Through you, Your Worship. So the other alternatives in terms of clean fill and clean fill in particular is to go to transport it to another site that has a consent for the discharge of clean fill, or to send it to landfill effectively. But as the Chief Executive has highlighted, this has been undertaken on that site as a capping process for the closed landfill to this point, under the existing consent that we have in place.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDonnell?
Just a question for Jason. If we're not allowed to put green waste there or clean fill, how do we ever cap the thing?
Probably, I think it's worth outlining here that this consent is pretty old, and so when the issue was raised by Environment Southland, The first thing we did is go to them and look at, let's work together in terms of trying to provide a better outcome, and we're willing to look at a new consent to move this forward and get it really up to standard in terms of what is expected now with that capping process. The old consent was developed early 2000s, so it's around 20 years old, and probably doesn't have great guidance in terms of that landfill remediation, and so it is a standard practice to use a clean fill and then using green waste as a mulch to then cap that, and that's quite consistently done across the country. What we're trying to do is formalise that through this consent process so that we have that we actually do achieve that good quality outcome that we are after, and have and limit any environmental effects as a result of that process. So we see it as an option to use those items to finish off that process and create a good environmental outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Worship. This abatement notice to me is extremely disappointing because I know that the community are very grateful for having free green waste, and if we have to then go ahead and pay for it to be transported somewhere else, we may have to look at whether we can afford the green waste to the transfer station. So I think this is very disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just a question for Jason. How much more capping would be required to actually complete that currently? And what would we use if those two things, the solid waste and the green waste, weren't allowed?
Through your Worship, the consent really works on identifying those volumes. I can't recall them off the top of my head, but there's a considerable amount there. I guess what we sort of identified through probably 3 years ago, I think, when this first came in front of Council in about 2020 following the 2020 flood events, was that the original capping was deficient in places with the consent, and so which required a minimum of 500 mils, again I think from memory. In some places it was as low as 300 millimetres, and again so the process since then has been to try and build up those areas, and I guess that's where the difference of opinion is between Environment South and ourselves, is around whether that's can be undertaken as part of that consent process, and we believe it is. But again, this was our goal was then to work together with Environment South and to update that consent to make sure that we're both happy with the processes in place and get the outcome that we desire.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser and then Councillor McPhail and then Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Jason and Steve, and through your Worship. I read this and I nodded my head. Be careful what I say here, but I struggle to understand how they issue an abatement notice and then issue another abatement notice and then don't turn up to Environment Court. What cost is that to Council for this to happen? I mean, and I'm not having a go at you, Jason, is that from what I read you were caught completely by surprise by this?
So I guess just to clarify that point, so we haven't been to court yet. I guess the court requested us to provide an affidavit on those things, and a response. We did that. Environment Southland chose not to, which I believe they can do, and that's effective of it where it is. That result in us achieving a stay from the court for the activity in the interim, with a then request that we enter a mediation to try and resolve, I guess, a difference of opinion.
Yeah, just to add to that, through your Worship, I think the issue really is that it was the request we requested the Environment Court for a stay, and yes, it was surprising given that the abatement notice Environment Southland was issued to us with pretty much a cease and desist with immediate effect. Hence, that we request the stay pending the actual substantive hearing on the appeal, and it was surprising given the Environment Southland's insistence about immediate cessation that there wasn't their view wasn't represented before the judge before he made his decision.
Thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, through your worship. Jason, is this the same system being used anywhere else in Southland? Like, is it a standard process or?
Through your worship, I guess there's different processes being used in Southland. My understanding, again, is that Invercargill City uses green waste to cap its landfill in Invercargill. They don't use clean fill there though. But I guess through this process and working with I guess our consultants who are supporting us, you know, again, this is a common practice though used across the country to cap landfills, and so we're not doing anything that is completely outside of the norm. Again, coming back to that point, it's really just, I think, about formalising that, and again, I think we possibly could have got to this point without the abatement notice would have been the ideal, but that's where we are.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think the abatement notice was needed, but a bit of talk between the two organisations probably would have helped a lot, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go Councillor Phillips and Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question for Jason then. The clean fill that they're describing in the notice, that there was large amounts, was it like clean fill as in dirt and stuff like that, or was it they referring to clean fill as in green waste?
Certainly both. They do refer to green waste and clean fill, certainly being separate. So clean fill is defined in terms of that soil or other sort of innate material, and green waste obviously has a different properties they're used for different parts of that capping process. So yeah, there's just distinct clarification between those two properties. But
so what was the largest group then that they were more concerned about? Was it the green waste or was it the clean fill? The reason why I asked that question is that when the previous staff came to us and said about the landfill needing capped because of its low volume, not exceeding the height, the correct height, was that we all accepted that the clean fill at the time was going to be clean fill as in the green waste, when we mulched up the green waste, was going to be the proper use to cap the landfill as such, which I questioned at the time because of its leachate problems with green waste. But I'm concerned that that we had more green waste than clean fill there, and that was probably the issue because of the leachate problem.
To you, Worship, probably just one point of clarification is around, well, one thing I can say. So we received an original abatement notice, which was just on clean fill, and then we got an upgraded abatement notice a month or so after that, which included green waste on top of that. And so clarification as to why that came in and at that time wasn't obviously clear to us, but yeah, there was certainly, again, just going back to that, there are some issues around green waste that with its leachate properties, if it's not managed correctly, and that's again another part of this process that we want to ensure is not having an environmental effect. Again, that's about having the right mitigations in place, and that's the reason why we believed as well that we should be looking at an upgraded consent, so to ensure that we are not having that effect, or those potential effects, as I should say, that have been pointed out.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Jason. Neil, did you still want to jump in?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in regards to Councillor, the question in regards to clean waste, clean fill and green waste, and going back, we've had previous discussions around the table on that. The situation is that a lot of clean fill has been used to fill in low-lying areas. The worst thing with a landfill is if water sits on the surface and over time it leaches down through. And there is a certain area, that old original capping of the landfill, which has never been dry, basically since 2006, when it was finally kept over. So a lot of the larger clean fill, such as some concrete, rubble, bricks, etc., has been used to bring that up to a degree. And we had a discussion today, and there's no issue with that as long as we still put a layer of clay over top, which basically seals it off, and then it'll be finished off with mulch or bark or topsoil. So that is now what we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, has eliminated a lot of that soakage runoff of the area into those damp areas. So they are now drying out. And it appears that some of the leachant over the years was going to that low-lying area and just staying wet.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Understanding what Jason and Neil have just said, that it's an old consent and that they're using a process of clay for capping, then takes away that man-made membrane wasn't being used if they're worried about leaching. Just on, do we do testing? Do we do our own independent water testing to verify what they're seeing at the end of the day?
Yeah, through Your Worship. So we're required under the consent to take to do monitoring at 2 bores every 5 years as part of that consent. There have been, I guess, some elevated readings there, but they're actually the readings are actually upstream of the, not downstream of the closed landfill area. So whether or not, again, the impact is actually from the landfill was, again, probably questionable. So it's there's some stuff to work through there, but yeah, that would be our view.
Yeah, my interpretation would be water runs downhill, but yeah. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question through you to Jason. You just said you've done your own water testing, and the problems are upstream as well as downstream, but the Environment Southland data indicates that there's been an increase downstream of nitrogen levels, and I also wondered if that's been increasing since 2004, because we weren't putting green waste at that stage. I don't recall, I'm not sure. But just what's the difference between the monitoring?
Through Your Worship, this is actually something that we've just been investigating more recently, and we would actually, our position is that probably, I think there's an interpretation of that data wrong. So we supply, as part of our consent monitoring, the data to ES, and I think that they've interpreted the data as being the downstream site rather than the upstream site, and so I just think there's actually a misread of that data. No, they don't sample it, we sample it. So.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll do one more question. I just want to keep us moving along because we still have quite an agenda ahead of us. One last question. No. Could I have a move that the report and attachments be received and noted? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Stringer. Any further comment? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. 105.11, proposed Gore District Plan Council submission. Did you want to talk to this one, Steve?
Reasonably straightforward, Your Worship. Like I said in my report, there's usually a few minor points that need to be corrected in a district plan, which is a big document. So it's been highlighted to me there's a few corrections, notable trees. There's a couple that have actually no longer exist, 2 or 3. Signs and just some alignment of rules with development and subdivision. So nothing of any real materiality, but just important to get it right when you've got the opportunity to. So hence asking your approval for this to go forward as a technical submission, as distinct from anything substantive to our own district plan.
Thank you, Steve. And I think it was a question raised by Federated Farmers at a recent meeting as to whether we'd be submitting on our own district plan. So I guess I can definitively answer that. And if this recommendation goes through, it'll be a yes. Any questions for the Chief Executive on this submission? Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Your Worship. Just a quick one on the notifiable trees. Just around the process there, if trees are dying off and we're adding new ones to the list, are we picking ones on people's properties and that, and do they have the ability to object to that? Thank you.
Through Your Worship, yes, the trees are deemed to be notable and they cover a mixture of private and public property. Off the top of my head, the vast majority tends to be in the public arena on reserve land. But there is a botanical assessment required. You just can't sort of just pluck a tree out of the air, as it were, and say, well, I think that's notable. And once it's in the plan, there is a resource consent required. And you would have seen that recently with the power plant property in South Gore, where those monkey puzzle trees were notable, but they were the subject of a resource consent decision with an independent commissioner, and they came down. But this is just a case of updating our plan to reflect reality. But no, we won't be rushing around and try and pluck new ones in. That they've got to pass a certain test of being notable.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid?
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Happy to move. Second, Councillor McDonnell. Any further comments? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Welcome back, councillors. Page 106, number 12, Southland Regional Heritage Committee Annual Report. Would either Councillor Phillips or Councillor Reid like to speak to this at all? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I'm just happy to take any questions. I believe there is some councillors asking the question about why aren't we sort of going along with the funding that we get, and I believe it may be prudent then perhaps that we have a little bit of a discussion sometime out of council about how the money's spent, where it's spent and so forth. So just happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I was one of those councillors wanting to ask some questions of the CFO, but it appears she is not here, so it might be a better conversation for when she is available. I'll open the floor, though, to any questions. No, I guess for the insight of other councillors, and I guess the public too, is just around the grants that we give, that we believe is a targeted rate, and just how that works. It works in a bit of a, by the looks of this, a bit of a roundabout. So we give over 237k, and then we get back just under 200k. So I guess my question for the CFO was kind of how does that process work? I'm guessing no one here knows that answer. Nope. Okay, but that's something that can be asked out of council. Any further questions on this one? Councillor Gardine?
I just noticed the auditing cost on that organisation nearly trebled, I think. So you may have to look at how the organisation is actually set up in the future. It may have to come under a council and try and cut out some of that audit cost. There is some rather large cost just to run an organisation, and if auditing keeps trebling every year, you'll definitely have to look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Gardine. Yeah, and that's what I want to ask about the roundabout, is whether that money then gets audited twice, because it seems like an expensive process for this committee to audit it and then for us to audit it. Or I believe it sits within the Invercargill City Council, the books, is that right, Councillor Reid? Yeah, so for them to audit, then for it to, yeah, it sounds complicated, but it's something that the CFO will be able to answer, I'm sure. Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps then it would be prudent for us then to have a bit like we just had with Great South, have a bit of a discussion about how they operate, how the money gets spent out, how it's allocated and so forth. And we'll have our employee Jim here at the present would be the best idea.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's actually a great idea, considering the money we give Great South and the targeted rate for this are relatively similar in funds. It would be good to have the CFO in that conversation for both. So I can see the Chief Executive jotting that down. Would you like that as a recommendation, or are you happy to note that? Cool. In that case, could I have a mover that the annual report of the Southland Regional Heritage Committee be received? Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Phillips. Any further questions on this report? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. 125.13, summary of Mayoral Forum meeting. Unless Councillor Val has... Oh no, I don't think... You weren't there for that one, were you, at the housing? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I guess just the continuing conversation about the locality boundaries. This was a while ago, I'm trying to recall, we were asked by Te Whatu Ora to start having a conversation about whether everyone could agree on some of the boundaries, in particular the Hukanui locality. We're lucky and we're the prototype, so we're ahead of the ball there, and they're already delivering some good outcomes there. But for us it's a bit tricky because the Hukanui locality, as it's prototyped, reaches into Southland District and also Clutha. So I believe at that meeting we decided it was actually best for that to go to a zone meeting where Clutha can be in the room, rather than us agreeing with Southland as to where the borders should be, but not Clutha. So it's an ongoing conversation, and hopefully a peaceful one. The other from my recollection was the presentation from Mayor Clark, which they had basically put together on request of, I believe it was the National Party, kind of a list of wants for the city. It was a conversation with both myself and Rob from SDC, if we could also create a similar document, and then all go to Wellington together, which Mayor Clark was comfortable with, and I believe the regional ask came out of that as well, which I think Great South has provided, as councillors would have seen. So that's all being worked in the background so that we have a position that we can take to Wellington, rather than just one council going off and asking for things. We can all go together, hopefully. Councillor Havel.
I can give an update in terms of the regional asks document, in that I put together something on behalf of council, asking the incoming government as our top priority to give funding to enable us to comply with the National Drinking Water Standards by providing funding for a pipe across the river and replacement of the reservoir in North Gore. And also as a second proposal, asking for a relatively modest amount in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a survey of gravel supplies that may be suitable for use by the territorial authorities. Gravel is becoming in short supply for our works, or good quality gravel, and the ownership under the current regimes, where they tend to be dominated by one or two firms, possibly has an impact on the price that we pay at the end of the day. So if the councils were able to act together, and it may even be appropriate for Clutha to be part of that, there's an opportunity of identifying gravel supplies that possibly the councils themselves should look at being the owners. So that's gone off. Even if it isn't accepted by government, it would be a useful thing to have discussed at the Mayoral Forum, to see if we can work together with the other councils to ensure that the money we do spend on our gravel supplies and on roading is spent wisely, and it's in the interest of government to see that happen too. Because if we can get gravel cheaper, then the money we're given by government goes further.
Thank you, Councillor. So yeah, that document's being worked. I think there's some stuff around housing in there as well, so that will come to fruition. I'm sure we'll come to a public meeting in the near future so that our community can indulge as well. Do we have any questions on those minutes? Nope. Could I please have a move that they be received? Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Phillips. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. 14 minutes of the Matoda Community Board meeting. On page 128. Did Neville want to speak to these at all? Sorry, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, the Community Board Chair and myself are happy to answer any questions that any councillors may want or have.
I was going to ask Murray for a question, but he's not here, so I will save his exciting news for another time. Jason, did you want to comment?
What's the question for Murray? I might have an answer for it if it's around the signs.
Are you going to steal his thunder? Yeah, go for it.
Just an update. So we've got one of the things holding up the signs has been the deed of grant from Kiwi Rail. So we have had some movement on that, and it's we're aware that it's going to be issued this week. So from there, we're requested with McDonough's to then hopefully get those signs in place, provided that all comes through prior to Christmas. So that's the latest and greatest.
Thank you, Jason. And I think it was a promise by the community board or someone that it would be by Christmas. So, yeah. Any further questions? Thank you for that update, Jason. Any further questions? I believe Neville's holding a party at the sign once it's in as well.
Yep. Too right. And I'll be wearing a Sandy hat. Just for the interest of the councillors who moved the petition about the bus services to the community board, you'll see by the minutes that the Mataura Community Board are going to work through the issue and report back later on. So,
thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Nope. Could I have a move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of October 2023 be received? Councillor Stringer, seconded by Councillor McPhail. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Number 15, page 134, minutes of the Sport New Zealand Rural Trust Fund Committee meeting. Would anyone like to speak to this at all? Councillor McDonnell?
It was a very short meeting. We only had one application and it was approved. So I'll move that the report be received, or is that what we're going to do? Yeah. Move that the minutes be received.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Gardine. Any further questions? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. The urgent late business as item 16. Find here. Hope I've got everything in the report. It was pretty frantic putting it together today. Just, I guess, want to express, spend a lot of time working with the committee on this agenda. Pretty proud of how it's turned out. The registrations have closed. We've sold out for the event with members all across the country going. So it's pretty exciting to see the increase in young elected members across the board. I'll give councillors a few minutes to read through it, and then happy to answer questions. Councillor Phillips, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just thinking I'm just a pity I'm not a bit younger. But
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Phillips did mention as I walked past about the cocktail function. If I am emceeing, I won't be able to drink at the cocktail function, unfortunately. And we'll be advising young members not to either, considering we'll be having a porphyry at Waitangi the next day. Probably not the thing you should show up to hungover, I'd imagine. Councillor Hovell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for bringing this report forward. I felt that the way that we have set up the mayoral funds, and I don't call it a budget because I don't believe there is a budget, is that this actually sits outside because it's not directly related to your role as mayor. It's more as a young elected member. And I thought it was appropriate, and I'm sure Councillor Mackenzie will agree, that we follow the correct process. I do wonder, though, that as part of this, whether there shouldn't be an additional recommendation to the effect that at the earliest convenience, that a budget be provided for elected members' travel and training. And that may be the long-term plan if we have long-term plans, or it may be some other basis. Because there's conferences that come up during the year, training opportunities that come up, and we're in a bit of a blind spot in terms of what are we able to go to. So not only should there be a budget, but there should be some criteria set out in terms of what's appropriate for us to attend. So I see that this report is coming forward, giving approval for what no doubt looks like a worthwhile exercise. But I really just want to get some structure moving forward so that we've got certainty and both over the monies and what's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'd welcome that as well. I think I've had offline conversations with a number of councillors as well about PD budgets, so personal development budgets. I'm not aware that we have them at this council. Other councils do. So a lot of the other young elected members have dipped into their PD budgets, so they get a certain allocation for that triennium that they're allowed to use for training and other things, and have those provisions. And then there's obviously mayoral budgets as well. So were you, just for clarification, Councillor Hovell, were you looking for a conversation around PD budgets and also mayoral budget, or are you wanting more of a conversation around travel? Which route, or encompassing it all?
My focus was really on the travel and training for us all. But in the absence of a mayoral budget as such, I think that's a worthwhile thing to explore. Yeah.
Yeah, we can have the discussion in LTV workshop about both. Yeah, that's easy enough.
There is some money.
So there is some money set aside for the mayor and chief executive's travel, I believe.
Yes,
yeah.
Conference attendance, travel,
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul McPhail.
Through Your Worship. Look, I'm just looking at it from a ratepayer's perspective of the value for our district of this event, or an event similar to it. And I think we've been striving, and the back to the basics comes back to me, and vanity projects keeps coming back in my head. I just need to know from you or whoever it's going to be is the value to our district.
Yeah, fair question. I personally think the agenda that we put together is an exceptional training opportunity. It's 3 days jam-packed with cultural training. We're going to hear from some amazing speakers across the board, and I'm looking to bring that knowledge back and share it with the council. Yes, it obviously is quite a price tag, but that includes accommodation, some I think lunches and bits and pieces, and also the entire conference. So we have tried to get that down. I think that is also subsidised slightly by LGNZ and sponsors too. So there's a whole lot of learnings in those 3 days that we're trying to package up, and I would be happy to bring back to the council. Cultural competency is something that we've been training in as well, so I'm hoping to bring back those learnings from Waitangi on what those are and share those experiences.
Thank you. We'll look forward to hearing all the wonderful knowledge of what you bring back.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard McPhail.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I won't go through too much here. Obviously, it'd be nice to have an old elected members Hui program at some stage, but we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait. Just confirming, and it's more operational, in this time frame that you're away there, doesn't tie into any of our CEO matters, CEO panel matters or anything like that. I'm not sure. I want to confirm that we're not, because we're running to the end of the year, and I know we're very, very tight, and that there's no availability or any issues there. Other than that, yeah, it looks a fine timetable, and I will look forward to your report back to us and what your learnings are.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Nikki has done an absolutely fabulous job working around my schedule, not only for, all of our schedules actually, not just for this event, but also how full all of our calendars come into the end of the year. CE recruitment in the Christmas period is difficult in terms of timeframes, to say the least. But we have stuck to track as it's been laid out. So yes, it won't interrupt that process. Any further questions?
I'd just like to move, Your Worship, that we accept this and pay for your, is it $900 something dollars, is it? And FS to go to this conference.
Thank you, Councillor. Does that include the recommendations by Councillor Hovell as well?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Well, are they well defined enough for you, Susan? Cool. Happy to second, Councillor Hovell? Yep. We'll continue having the conversation. Councillor Stringer?
Through you, Worship. Didn't realise Kerikeri had an airport. I'm just wondering if it's like Gau's one. Can you let us know when you fly in, please?
Yeah, neither did I. I was actually planning on flying to Auckland and driving up, but yeah, I was told there's an airport exactly where we're going, so that works too. Yeah. Any further questions, comments? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. That brings us to the end of the in-public meeting. I will just quickly close with the karakia, and then we will have a 5-minute break? Yeah. 10-minute break. Cool. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura. He teo, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Kia ora everyone.